It caught me off guard. I was not
Yeah,
ready for that.
you
This
seem
hotel lobby was not ready for that.
yeah, you seem a little bit out of your element today, Patrick. This isn't usually the living room or the beautiful outdoor surroundings I'm accustomed to seeing you in. Where are you today?
I'm in Dearborn, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
My wife and I drove in last night. We are here a day early so I can practice on stage for giving my little TEDx speech tomorrow. And yeah, there is wireless in the hotel, but it does not work from my room. So I was forced to wander the halls like a zombie last night until
Oh,
I
that's
could pick up
brutal.
a decent enough signal. And it seemed like the lobby is where I don't even know how hotel like I don't know how like large expansive wireless is set up. I assume it is not just like a big router. Like is it
No,
multiple routers? How
it's
does that even work?
I think good hotels use multiple routers and sort of chain that stuff. It's not just one giant thing that you're running off of. But if you're in a hotel in Dearborn, Michigan, I'm saying the odds of them having, high-tech IT services probably a little lower than usual.
No, I thought the campus is like a couple blocks away. I thought about going there, but so if the audio and video is out of sync, yeah, we can go ahead and blame Dearborn, Michigan. Like the city of Dearborn is we'll just blame, not this
I blame them
hotel.
for most of my other problems in life, so why stop there? Why not continue on?
Although, as I say this in the lobby, I probably shouldn't say this given that I'm here for the next 2 days, but this is one of those hotels where, like, you look around and it looks like a four-star hotel, but then you go
Hmm.
in the rooms and it's definitely like 2.5. Like,
Right.
you know where the money was spent in this place.
The money was spent on a lobby they could take pictures of and impress people via the internet, and then like these little tiny dark photos of the rooms that don't really show what you're in for.
Well, like, so this place is, like, gone green, so there's no, like, directory of what the hotel has, like, in terms of food or services, which is fine,
Right.
that, whatever. But,
Hmm.
so all of the menu information is on the TV, like, you go to a certain channel, but they're all, like, really, really old CRTs, so you can't, but the PowerPoints have clearly been made on, like, high-end displays, like a laptop or a computer, so you can't
Right.
read any of them on a CRT.
Oh. Oh no.
Not that I don't think I would eat any of the in-house dining at an establishment like this, but nonetheless. How was
Patrick
your week?
Klepek taking it to the hotels of Dearborn, Michigan. Hardcore on Bombin on the AM.
Yeah, well, welcome to our TripAdvisor report.
Yeah.
Live.
I can't wait to read your Yelp review.
So what have you been up to this week?
Oh God, what have I been doing this week? I have been playing. Well, I've been trying to get live streaming stuff going for most of this week and failing pretty miserably at it. There's a lot of weird things that I'm trying to make work in the context of that stuff. So I've basically given up on having the ideal setup that I wanted, which was something similar to Encyclopedia Bombastica, but something I can do live well. So I'm gonna have to regroup and try some different stuff next time around next week. But apart from that, I did play some games. I started playing Pokemon. I know
Yeah,
you
yeah.
also started playing Pokemon. Now this
Why did you
is
start playing Pokemon? Why'd you start playing
because
Pokemon, Alex?
um, because somebody sent me a code for Pokemon, despite my never actually asking anyone to get me a code for Pokemon. Someone was like, "Hey, I got a thing for you. I got this
I'm gonna ruin your
Pokemon
week.
code," and then you emailed it to me, and it was like, "Well, shit, I can't just let this go to waste.
Yeah,
I
that
can't
would
just leave it."
irresponsible. Irresponsible.
So I downloaded Pokemon, and I played a couple hours so far of Pokemon. Okay, before I get into what I think of it, Patrick, I want to know how you're liking it thus far.
Well, I only played about an hour. I was
Okay.
pretty busy this week, but it seems like here's a weird thing up front. Like, game aside, is that I haven't seen this in a 3DS game before, where the 3D switches on and off, like at
Mhm.
will, like in different
Yeah.
sections. So, like in battle, the 3D is on, but then in the
Right.
town sections, the 3D is off. I don't know
That
if that
confused me a lot at first.
And I don't know if that's like a
Yeah.
battery conservation issue or if that's I don't know. It's just unique. I've never seen it in a 3DS game before, for sure.
Sure.
But the game itself, I mean, it seems like Pokemon. Like, for better or worse, like it seems like another Pokemon game, and it's been, God, like 15 years, if not
Yeah.
longer, since I've played one of those. And I someone on Tumblr asked me like, well, why are you playing it now? Like, we asked you to play before. It's like, well, because now everyone's playing it, and I'm sort of one of those zeitgeist games that, with something like Watch Dogs falling out as something that I'll have to commit my time to, it seemed like, yeah, why don't I at least give this a shot? And it's one of those games that I don't feel like it will break my playing one game at a time rule, because I try and play one game at a time so I actually finish them. But Pokemon is something I can kind of like chip away at over like the course of the holiday.
So I'm not convinced I'm actually going to do that. Here's the thing. I've played about 2 hours so far, and there's nothing wrong with that game. It seems, it's cheerful. Mechanically, it's pretty much what everyone told me it was. It's, kind of a light-ish RPG. I picked up, again, this is my first Pokemon game ever. I have never played one of these games before. And I picked up the basic idea of capturing and battling and all that kind of stuff, pretty quickly. I've got a few different Pokemon now. I've got, I've been hanging out with the kids a little bit and doing some stuff.
Gross.
I just don't think I care.
Okay.
It's nothing that the game is doing wrong. I just don't think that I am particularly attuned to. I'm not picking up what Pokemon's putting down. I think that if I had more affinity for the series, I think if I had, kind of grown up a little bit more with it, I think that if I had maybe tried playing it before the age of nearly 32, maybe I might have gotten more into it. I will keep playing it for a little while because it is fun enough. I think it's cute. It's enjoyable. I just don't think it's my thing. So the one thing I will concede to everyone is that I used to think Pokemon was just super dumb. I don't think that anymore. I don't think Pokemon's super dumb. I think that, okay, there is some appeal here. I totally get what it is that people like about it. I just don't think it's for me.
All right. Well, that's a step. We're gonna play at least a little bit more of it. I'm definitely
gonna play at least a few more hours.
Yeah, I will probably do a deep commitment on it, just not in a short time span. But I'm looking forward to getting more. You have Pokemon Y. I have Pokemon X, which means you have some sort of exclusive Pokemon that I'm not deep enough to care about that quite yet. I don't think.
Yeah, and Brad, like the thing that actually got me like a little bit over the hump of being like, well, am I gonna download this and just not play it? Was Brad, as soon as he apparently found out that I had taken the Y code, got on, was like, what's your friend code? Everyone has Pokemon X, no one has Pokemon Y. Trade with me, and I was like, I haven't even downloaded it yet. I couldn't even get on the eShop for the first day, and then I didn't have enough SD card space, so I had to go buy a new SD card. I went and bought a new goddamn SD card just so I could download that dumbass game.
You did, because what were you going to do? Not cash in the code?
I know!
Like, that would be irresponsible. It is interesting, though, especially to watch, like, especially amongst the people that are kind of in our age bracket of, it does seem like this is, for a lot of people, the first one they're playing in, like, 10 or 15 years. Maybe not, Red and Blue were the initial releases, so I think more people than not have played at least one or two of those in between, but it does seem like this is sort of kind of like Animal Crossing, where maybe there hasn't been any sort of fundamental shift in gameplay, but it's been just long enough that for a lot of people that did enjoy it, it's been long enough that, hey, this works again, which Nintendo is uniquely very, very good at.
And that's exactly what happened with me with Animal Crossing. I played the shit out of the GameCube game. I played a bunch of the DS one. I didn't really play the Wii one at all. And so that long enough break between the DS one and the 3DS one was enough to get me back into it. I think if I had gotten on Pokemon around the same time, or with the same kind of energy that I had with Animal Crossing back in the day, then maybe it would be a different story right now. But I think it's too late for me. I'm sorry.
Well, for all sorts of reasons. Pokemon, the least of them. Trying to see, I didn't really. Oh, you know what? I played from start to finish. Not that that's much of an accomplishment, but I finished the Wolf Among Us, which I was surprised how much I liked. All of a sudden I was like, what's going on?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
There's my girlfriend bothering me.
Nothing happened. I was surprised how much I got into the setting. I think when you say it out loud, the idea of storybook fable characters living in Brooklyn sounds really stupid. Sounds really, really stupid. And yet somehow they pulled it off in a fashion that doesn't feel like it's just goofy enough, and it just takes itself just seriously enough that you can buy into the premise, but it also allows them to skate a really fun, fine line of setting it putting it in a contemporary setting, but allowing them to also indulge in all the weirdness that goes along with the characters that they have.
There's an interesting vibe in that game where it's like even the characters in that game seem to acknowledge that their own existence is a little bit absurd in the context of the modern world. Like, not so much that like they're cursing it, but they're just sort of like aware that it's bizarre that they are kind of ensconced in this largely human world where they have no place, and it kind of fits in a way that you don't necessarily expect it to. I've read a few reviews of the first episode since I finished it, and it seems like most people are pretty on board with the tone of it. I've seen a few people complain that it's a lot of detective show, and mystery cliches kind of, topped onto the fantastical setting, which I agree. There's definitely some cliched stuff in there. But the character writing and the dialogue and sort of the interactions between those characters, I think, transcend a lot of that stuff. I think that something about Telltale and that team and those guys, like, they have a knack for grounded dialogue, even in the most, bizarre, fantastical situations, that doesn't pull you out of the scenario. Even when you're talking to a goddamn pig who is crashing on your couch, you still feel like there's a natural flow to their conversation that works way better than it should. So for me, it's like, yeah, there's maybe a few little flaws in there, but like the atmosphere and the writing and all that stuff, and the interactivity too, which is never the number one thing that Telltale games do, but like I think that as far as like what they learned from season 1 of The Walking Dead, like what they managed to build into that game is pretty great.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the way that this game, and I'll be curious to see if they approach it this way in future episodes, but without giving away how it works, and the couple times they use it, the puzzles aren't as, I guess, obvious in the sense that like you walk into a room and it's like, now it's time to solve a puzzle.
Right.
Some of the ways they employ it are actual puzzles through dialogue, things that aren't necessarily obviously puzzles, but as you start to pick up on what's happening, you realize, oh wait, this is a puzzle, and they're hiding the puzzle in the dialogue, and
right.
It's the moment where that plays out is super fascinating, and I think it's an interesting way of approaching it where they can reward the player for paying attention, but without punishing someone that doesn't pick up on it or doesn't want
right.
to play with that part of it. Because I feel like they are increasingly trying to, skate a really fine line of, appealing to a wider audience that is more interested in the story and the characters, while also trying to justify the interactive nature of the game that you're playing. And I think they try some really interesting things that are, more successful than, the Jurassic Park. They seem
right.
to be on a pretty interesting track, and it makes me wonder how divergent The Walking Dead will be, when we, I think probably pretty soon start hearing about, the second season of that game.
Well, they had been at one point talking like that second season was still going to come out this year. I'm not convinced that's going to be the case at this point, because I feel like they would have said something by now if that were the case.
My guess was always that, and this is a complete hunch, this is zero insight, but that AMC had to look at the success of the Walking Dead game as opposed to the Walking Dead game they put their money on, which was the Activision one, and sort of maybe understand that they bet on the wrong horse. And so I was always wondering whether there would either be a formal partnership between AMC and Telltale to mutually benefit each other, or if they would just sort of overlap the content so that they could benefit even if there wasn't actually a formal partnership.
I imagine it depends at least a little bit on how long that deal they signed with Activision was. Like, if it was just for one game, then yeah, by all means they should. But I mean, if they're still locked in with those guys for a while, that could be a problem.
I guess so, but I mean, and like you look at like the amount of, if you read the scuttlebutt about like the Walking Dead TV show, like Robert Kirkman has a pretty extraordinary amount of control over his properties, and
right.
he was involved in the Telltale game as well. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if there's no formal partnership that we actually start, if you look at the way The Wolf Among Us episodes are probably going to come out, it will probably end around the time that the Walking Dead TV show is finishing.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there was a natural lead-off point from the end of the television season to, the beginning of The Walking Dead Season 2 in game form. Because there's going to be so much excitement for The Walking Dead Season 2, I can't imagine they're going to launch it like in 2 weeks just out of nowhere with no hype built whatsoever.
I'm thinking if they are going to do it this season, it's going to be whatever the mid-season finale is, because they usually do that with The Walking Dead. Like, they'll run like 8 episodes, then they'll run the last 7, in 2014. But But yeah, if they're not going to do it this year, then they're definitely going to try and time something around, whenever the other Walking Dead finishes. I think that's ultimately what kind of ended up happening with the South Park game, is I think that's scheduled to come out right around the time that season ends, so
Right.
or at least comes close to it. So yeah, I don't know. As much as I am looking forward to The Walking Dead, I'm kind of glad Fables is there to sort of fill that, that void for a little bit. I mean, they're two totally different games, like story-wise, but in terms of, the way the writing style and the gameplay style, like it scratches a similar itch. So, I'm digging that.
Yeah, I think anyone that did like The Walking Dead is going to love The Wolf Among Us. The test for me was, I played The Walking Dead with my wife, where I held the controller and did all the actions, but had her choose, where we spent our time, what the dialogue choices were. And so I was hoping to do that again with her. And, we were only going to play like 45 minutes. And then, as soon as I'd be like, oh, we should probably turn it off and watch a show or something, she'd be like, nope, need to see what's happening with Mr. Toad. Like, so why don't you hit that left trigger and let's keep going. And then by, at some point, then we hit the end of it. And goddamn, that episode ends on one hell of a cliffhanger.
Yes,
and
it does.
I really hope they're able to tighten up the release schedule on those episodes, because I really need to know what the hell happened at the end of that.
I think they're talking one a month. So
Okay.
if that's the case, that's not so bad. Every 6 to 8 weeks would definitely be a little rougher for something like that. So
that's all I played this week. There's a lot of news.
yeah, I won't dwell on this much because I didn't really play very much else. I tried playing a little bit of Space Base since that's now out available
Right.
on Steam. I unfortunately was running into some glitches, so I couldn't really get much into it, but that seems cool. And I also I played the Stanley Parable demo. I have not played the actual Stanley Parable yet. I'm waiting until I get back from my weekend away this weekend to sit through that. But I've heard nothing but spectacular things, and that demo is pretty great. So if you're on the fence at all, just try that demo, because that will give you a pretty good idea of what kind of weird wackiness you're in store for.
Yeah, the demo is amazing because it is both, I think, instructive and indicative of what people are in for in the game proper, but at the same time also deconstructs the existential crisis of building a demo, and is actually amazingly nakedly honest about how stressful an experience it is to provide, a quote-unquote vertical slice of your game without giving away your game. And I think it's, if that's what the entirety of the Stanley Parable is, something along those lines, at least thematically, I think that can be really exciting. And it sounds like the game has like a bajillion endings that people are still trying to figure out where all of them are hidden. And so I kind of want to get into it as soon as I can when I get home, because it's fun to be a part of the discovery process.
Oh, totally.
It's not quite Fez, but it certainly has that feeling of like, okay, go do this, and then So it's people should check it out. The demo will tell you up front. I think it is. It's one of those games that if the humor connects for you, it's going to really connect. And it seems like for the people who it doesn't connect for, it does not connect whatsoever. So you'll know pretty quickly whether it's something you're going to want to drop some money on. Because right now I think it is a little bit cheaper while it's in its launch period.
Yeah, it's only I think it's $11.99 right now instead of the $15 or $14.99 that it would be normally. So grab it cheap if you're going to grab it.
Yep.
All right, let's get into the news, because good lord, there is a fair amount of it this week.
We should probably start with the big stuff, right? The delays are probably top of mind, especially given there was one this morning as well.
Yes.
But
let's start with Ubisoft, because that was kind of the big thing that dominated most of the week this week. Is that both Watch Dogs, Ubisoft's big open world cell phone hacking Batman simulator, and The Crew, which was its multiplayer driving game, have been delayed into 2014. Watch Dogs was always kind of scheduled to be a launch game, so much so that there was a PS4 bundle associated with that game. Yeah. The Crew is a little bit more nebulous. It was never, it was always kind of targeted for end of the year, but nobody actually had a date for it, so that one's a little less surprising. But the Watch Dogs thing seems like kind of a pretty big deal, to the point where Ubisoft's stock has dropped up like 25% since this announcement came out. Patrick, what does this actually mean for the grand scope of the new console launches? Like, does this, and I mean, does Watch Dogs not being there, is that a bigger deal for Sony or Microsoft, do you think?
Certainly Sony, if they're if they're doing a hardware partnership, and I always figured the hardware partners would figure out a way to placate, the consumers that had purchased the bundle and get them they would allocate resources so that they would make sure they'd be able to get a regular machine if they still wanted one. But it strikes me as the fact that there was confusion over how that was going to be handled, that this was a pretty recent decision to push that game back, because those games, from what I am told, are entering cert right about now in order to hit those launch dates. And so, it's hard to tell what would have driven Ubisoft to make such a late game decision. It's possible they looked at tracking for Assassin's Creed 4, which is getting a really big marketing push right now. I've seen the trailers, on football all the time and all sorts of other television shows, and maybe the tracking on that is good enough that they thought that it would start cannibalizing their other IP that they were trying to launch, and if they waited till the spring, that maybe you'd get the new machines have a little more traction, but they also face a lot stiffer competition in the spring. That's assuming that the other games that come in the spring actually hit in the spring. But when they're talking spring, we're not talking March. Like the date that they put for Watch Dogs was in the first quarter, which is April 1st to June 30th.
That's probably like an April or May release.
Right, and then also in that period is Destiny and Titanfall. Not to mention what other games that I might be missing off the top of my head. But they are suddenly stacked against some of their bigger games. Obviously, they're a little bit different. I think Titanfall and Destiny are going head-to-head much more so than they are going against Watch Dogs. But nonetheless, the only theory I have is that Assassin's Creed was looking well, or Watch Dogs at the 11th hour was having serious issues. They were pretty vocal about some of the technical things they were struggling with, especially on the console side. People were upset that they were theorizing that the games might be running at 30 frames a second at 720p. That's stuff that bothers me less, but I also think it's indicative of, launch crunch that is difficult to achieve, especially on new consoles. And so, hopefully maybe the spring gives them, a chance to iron out those things, because it looked like that was going to be a visual showcase for these new machines. And for me, the thing that, increasingly, if I was not someone that did this for a living, I wouldn't be buying either of these machines at launch.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting to that same point as well, and this seems like as good a time to anyway kind of move into the other big delay that we just learned about today, which was Drive Club. This was a Sony exclusive driving game that I believe was unveiled at the last E3 press conference, and was another multiplayer focused kind of driving game type deal from one of Sony's internal studios. And I've played it a couple of times and never really felt anything to one way or the other about it. It just seemed like, okay, I mean, that was the game where they had the demo where the guy was basically like fetishizing car seats and talking about, all the great detail in the cars. And then, after playing it was kind of like, yeah, it's interesting. But it never really kind of set my world on fire. But nonetheless, it was one of the only big exclusives that, Sony had for that lineup. So that's like two big games that were part of the PS4 lineup that are gone now, and one from the Xbox One. And that's
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that they're not going to be pushing out at least like a Drive Club PS Plus, like that beta or whatever they were talking about giving to PlayStation Plus subscribers.
They apparently replaced that with Contrast. So now instead of that, PS Plus players will just get Contrast. Which is not really the same.
No, it's not. I was surprised they wouldn't at least have a demo or something there. But obviously we're seeing, like, if we're seeing all of these announcements triggered right now, I suppose it's possible that everyone's just trying to group it together and kind of weather the storm collectively. Or I think what's more likely is that we're starting to see cert submissions happen. We're starting to see games come back, maybe have a little bit difficulty getting through cert, or we're at the 11th hour and it's time to start making decisions on whether those games are hitting launch and what's getting a marketing push. And these games aren't making it. It feels like, and I might be wrong, maybe because it's just been so long since we've had a big simultaneous launch, but it feels like this is coming later than we normally hear about this stuff.
It is, and it's weird because I've seen both those games recently. They showed Drive Club at Gamescom, and then they had a press event where they showed that same build. And then I saw Watch Dogs like 2 weeks ago. And there was no indication at that point that game was not going to be ready. They were still talking about it like it was going to be a launch game and everything was good to go. They asked for my honest feedback about it afterward, but I mean, what I said was not really anything that damning because it still looked really good. Like everything
Hmm.
mechanically about it looks really good. The only thing I'm still confused about with that game is like the story and the justification for any of what you're doing. They haven't talked about any of that shit really.
Right.
But that's not a reason to delay the game. That means there's something weird technical going on with that game that is not ready. But as of 2 weeks ago, it didn't seem like anyone was really concerned about that. So it's weird. Yeah, the timing is very bizarre and suspect. It's unusual for launch games like this to get delayed so close to the wire, which leads me to believe that there are just like cataclysmic issues in these games that they just have not been able to iron out before the launch, and that's strange. But I mean, in the end, it's probably for the best because Lord knows you don't want to put out some broken ass games on just when people are buying new systems.
Well, and also launch lineups are kind of overrated.
Yes.
And also, although I feel slightly counterintuitive, not important. The promise of these games weren't canceled; they were pushed back. There is a lot of fresh new car smell that goes along with buying a new console that goes a pretty long way, and maybe there'll be some downloadable games that surprise us that end up being sort of a Geometry Wars-esque, like, hey, this is good enough while I wait for the other stuff to come out. And then also I think Sony's being smart, porting some of their higher quality PS3 games to PS4 and giving you cross-buy on that. Like, I'll play through Flower again in 60 frames a second, 1080p. Like, I will happily do that.
Play some more fucking Sound Shapes. Hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't played any of the DLC for that game. And so having these games, if they can have a solid spring launch lineup, I think that's more important than a solid November lineup because the kinds of people that are going to buy it in November, the suckers like you and me and a lot of people in this chat room with us, we're going to buy it regardless of what is in that launch lineup because we just want to be there on day one. And I'd much rather have much more polished, higher quality games hitting at a regular pace in the spring than having those in November because I'm still going to have a backlog in November.
Yeah, I mean, Lord knows, not having a lot of games in the spring, summer, and up to a point fall kind of didn't help the Wii U at all. And yeah, I mean, the long tail view is definitely what you want to look toward. You want to make sure you have stuff ready to go on a regular basis. And yeah, dumb idiots like us are the only ones who buy consoles, at launch. I have to because for work. But and to answer your question earlier, would I still have both consoles pre-ordered at this point? If I were just buying as a consumer, I don't know that I would. In fact, I might cancel both at this point because while there are games like I want to play Forza, I want to play a couple of the PlayStation indie games, and I was kind of looking a little bit forward to Drive Club, but not really. But I don't know. It's like there's just not that much. There's just not that much, and there's never that much with console launches. Like usually you're more giddy for the technology upgrade than you are the actual games, but this is the one time when I can definitively say I don't think I would buy one of these things.
Yeah, and especially if you've been someone like a lot of us on Giant Bomb, like if you've been on the PC for a decent length of time, that is also sort of, I think, blunted some of the giddiness to move to next gen because you've kind of been there as the technology has progressed. Obviously, there'll be a leap with the new consoles, but you've had high-end console games for a while, and what we're seeing out of launch stuff, looks better, but isn't, I don't know. What do you think of NBA? Like, that was the first, I guess, game that people are surprisingly going like, oh, this is what I expected when these machines were announced.
Yeah, that trailer they put out yesterday looked really, really good. I still want to see it actually in motion. Like, I actually want to get my hands on a controller and see how it performs in the game environment because the multi-camera stuff apparently is all in that game, and so you'll get those angles and you'll get some of those shots. But I want to see how it actually performs. But in terms of visual fidelity, I mean, that was what was definitively missing from stuff like Madden. Those trailers they showed for Madden and what I've played of Madden on Next Gen is just like, well, they up-resed everything from the existing Madden engine. Whereas with 2K14, it looks like they kind of rebuilt the game a little bit, which I think means that it won't have all the same features as the current gen version. But visually, it looks a lot more like the kind of showpiece that you kind of expect from a sports game at console launch. And we haven't seen anything of that other goddamn NBA game in a long time, and so I'm not even know when we're gonna see anything from that. But
that's supposed to be launch, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be. They didn't have it at the last EA Sports event I went to 2 weeks ago. So
man.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
I don't know. That game's got to come out though, right?
I mean,
can you
Heads
really
are
do
gonna
that
roll.
3 times? I don't think that's
Heads are going
possible.
to roll if that thing does not come out. But I'm not. I don't know. I have some worries. But 2K14 looks really good, and if anything, like whatever it was, I think it was 2K6 that came out at Xbox 360 launch. That was nowhere near as much of a visual leap between versions, but gameplay wise, they didn't compromise much. So I'm kind of hoping that they're able to sort of keep that balance between hot visuals and a game that I really like. I'll play that. Yeah, I mean, I'm going
Right.
to review it anyway, but I am actually kind of excited for that version.
Yeah, and not being a sports aficionado, at least basketball myself, game-wise, I'm just genuinely curious to watch all the stuff play out with EA because the pressure must be on for them to have an equally, if not more so, impressive first trailer.
Yeah.
Whereas if they were smart enough to at least get out there first, even if they didn't look as good as 2K14, at least you had managed to be like, hey, we're the first, one of the first next-gen sports games to get shown off. And now they don't have that. And so now they need to look really impressive because I have to imagine that a lot of people were genuinely shocked by that trailer and ended up, especially with something like Drive Club, like maybe they shifted, their pre-order over to that game.
Someone in the chat is saying that they have a friend who is crunching hard on that NBA game and that it should make launch. So that's.
Deeply, deeply sorry for your friend. Hopefully,
I
he
am
makes
looking
it through.
forward to seeing that game actually exist. Straight up. Why don't you throw a headline at me?
Let's see. Well, apparently 2K Marin is done for. The developer of the Bureau, XCOM Declassified, and BioShock 2. One of those is better than the other.
One of those did a lot better than the other.
Yeah, I quite liked BioShock 2. I think it was hurt more by the fact that it was called BioShock 2 than anything else, and it had a much better last climax than the original BioShock did. It actually had a really, really good one. In any case, so Rock, Paper, Shotgun and Polygon and Eurogamers, a bunch of places are being told that the outlet is not just having layoffs as a result of XCOM not performing, but essentially everyone that's not going to Rod Ferguson's new team is being laid off. It sounds like Rod Ferguson is basically becoming 2K Marin 2.0, starting from scratch, taking the talent that he wants and starting anew. Because from everything I've heard from people that have worked at that studio in the past, there is an enormous amount of wasted talent at that studio, and that the fact that 2K Marin has put out some of the games it has, especially its most recent one, has much more to do with people in charge of that studio than it does with the people actually building the games there.
Yeah, someone made the comment on Twitter. I can't remember who it was, so I apologize to whoever that was for stealing their quote without attributing it. But someone said on Twitter that studio had basically been built to create original new IPs for 2K. Yeah. And the only two games it made were BioShock 2 and the Bureau XCOM Declassified, which obviously were existing franchises. Which is a real bummer. It's kind of it's sad when you can see that there's some kind of talent, some kind of promise there, and then it's just not fully realized. I mean, BioShock 2, I didn't finish it. It seemed I did play Minerva's Den, which obviously was kind of its own little thing and was pretty spectacular. But BioShock 2 was totally inoffensive and actually continued the original game's concepts better than they probably should have. Though they really had any right to. And even in the Bureau, you can see that they spent a long time on that game. There clearly were a lot of divergent ideas and concepts that they never completely got working together in harmony on that game. But there was something there. There was something you could see that, like, a germ of a really good idea that just didn't completely come to fruition. And then it just didn't sell, because it was a game that didn't really have an audience, and it didn't really have a great deal of quality behind it to really kind of prop it up behind the sort of lack of marketing underneath. And it's just too bad. You don't like to see studios, die under these kinds of circumstances. I mean, at least, the consolation is that there is a new studio being put together, and, hopefully that turns out to be something good. And those guys have something interesting to work on. But, you feel for the people that worked on that stuff, and you feel bad that it just didn't quite come together. I certainly feel bad that it didn't quite come together.
Well, if this is an excuse for people to play Minerva's Den, go play Minerva's Den. especially if you liked Gone Home, same
Yeah.
team. Minerva's Den is an extraordinary game that is better than Bioshock 2, and just it only emboldened my wish for at some point there had been a team assigned to do sort of a Tales from Rapture, just sort of mini stories set within the Rapture universe, because obviously as Infinite goes back to revisit that, there's a lot of fondness for that world that I continue to have, and I think there's a lot more to be mined there, and I wish there had been more of an attempt to do that, because I think that's probably what people more wanted from the Bioshock universe than
Sure.
an actual Bioshock 2, even if like you said, it turned out better than it had any right to be. But
Yeah. So, happy trails to those guys, and best of luck finding work as soon as humanly possible. I've seen lots of people on Twitter doing the usual thing that happens in these circumstances where they start posting job listings like crazy.
Yep.
That's the one thing I definitely admire about this industry, is that they don't let people go without work any longer than they have to.
yeah.
Speaking of underperforming,
Ooh.
and going back to Ubisoft for a minute, another thing that might have led to their stock not doing super well this week is that they have basically called out both Splinter Cell Blacklist and Rayman Legends as games that have underperformed. They have not thrown out specific numbers for either of these games, saying exactly what they expected and what they actually sold. But basically what they are saying is that Blacklist and Rayman did not perform to what they had expected those games would. My question to you, Patrick, is, was there, Splinter Cell is a franchise that has kind of endured for a long time. I don't know what the sales trajectory for that franchise is, but I feel like Blacklist, for all its marketing, didn't really seem to necessarily with a whole lot of people. And Rayman has never been the sort of Rayman Origins wasn't a sales juggernaut either, so I'm not really sure what their expectation was. When you look at studios like this talking about games like this underperforming, is this another case, do you think, of a publisher maybe having too lofty expectations, or is this, like a greater indicator of maybe where these franchises are actually at?
There was a weird spot in that late August period where Saints Row 4 and XCOM and Splinter Cell all came out at once, and we sort of theorized that one game was probably going to gobble up the other two. And
sure.
That sort of ended up happening. But I also think, Splinter Cell Blacklist, I haven't played it since we last talked about it, but it seems like a well-made game, but it also seems like a game that not that many people were asking for. And for whatever reason, didn't connect and had very little buzz either from critics or even just from consumers going.
Despite them releasing 72 trailers for that game.
Yeah, but that's online stuff.
Yeah.
That's much different than going out there and getting actual television commercials and print marketing and things like that. Just cutting together a trailer is a very low cost way of marketing a game, and it almost makes me wonder how effective it is if they did that many for Splinter Cell and it didn't translate into sales. But yeah, Splinter Cell, I think it needs to take a rest. I think it probably would have made more sense for that game to be, maybe an early next-gen title as opposed to a late current-gen title, something like that. Rayman, they didn't push at all. That game got zero marketing. Their solution to Rayman was, well, let's put it out on every platform and hopefully we'll get some more sales, but they also did absolutely nothing to promote that at all. And obviously Nintendo sort of dropped its half of it once it no longer became a Wii U exclusive. Despite that, I think being probably the best platform to play the game on. Ubisoft didn't really hold up their end of the bargain on that one.
It's not as bad as when they put out Origins right in the middle of a November rush, because that game just had no chance compared with all the stuff that came out alongside it a couple of years ago. This time, at least, it had a little bit of space between it and a lot of other big games. But like you said, they just didn't push it. And I don't understand video game marketing perhaps as well as I think I do. I don't necessarily understand what goes into deciding what you're going to push and what you're not. I assume that everyone has these numbers and they have these projections that sort of tell them what they are expected to sell and what they should actually spend to try and get a game to that level. Not necessarily understanding what those metrics are and how those statistics work, it still is just incredibly frustrating to me as someone who adored the shit out of Rayman Legends, seeing it just kind of flounder I mean, even if it sold, a decent amount, I'm just trying to like I want to know what their projection for that game was. I want to know what Ubisoft internally thinks a Rayman game should sell. And I feel like knowing those numbers would give us a lot better perspective on whether that's actually reasonable or not. You talk about that Square Enix stuff from earlier this year where they were talking about like Tomb Raider being a disappointment despite selling millions of copies. And I'm wondering, well, who told you it was going to sell more than that? What metric were you using to determine that that game was going to not sell, like is going to sell this many copies, and that was not enough for you? And we're never going to see that level of transparency, obviously, and I hate that we're never going to see it because it would give us so much better perspective on this stuff. But I don't know, man. When I just see people, when I see saying Rayman Legends was a disappointment, that just makes me sad. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. You have to wonder if like did they suddenly have some sort of sky high Mario Sonic-esque aspirations for that franchise, and if so, that seems like incredibly misguided.
That's the kind of thing you should tell someone. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You should adjust this expectation some.
But maybe they look at sort of the buzz from fans and critics, and if you look at that, it seems like that game is going to be huge. But obviously that didn't translate, and platformers are tough. I think platformers are probably one of the most difficult genres to break out in,
sure.
Especially if you're talking about at retail, where increasingly it seems like the way to be a successful, profitable platformer is to be a cheaper downloadable game as opposed to sort of a big budget retail $60 game, which is largely dominated by games like Mario and Sonic. I think they want to be in that pantheon, but getting in there from a market perspective is incredibly difficult. I think people are happy buying the platformers that they're used to, and the place where you can have some experimental success is actually in downloadables. And had they chosen to sell Rayman Legends at $15 and then you paid for additional worlds, like maybe that wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. But obviously what they're doing now isn't working. But at least I'm glad I got 2 games out of it. So if there's not another Rayman, that's unfortunate, but I also feel like I got 2 of the best games of the generation out of that series.
I'm just going to be really curious to see how Sonic Lost World does, for instance, because, I mean, that game is only on Nintendo platforms, and I'm curious what kind of sales that game is going to garner, because it seems like, okay, if we're still, kind of leaning on these Mario and Sonic games to sort of be the big, genre leaders, are people actually going to run out and buy that game on the Wii U? Especially considering the reviews for that game, and I'm reading this morning, not super great. So that's gonna be interesting to see how that one performs.
Yeah.
I have big headlines. If you wanna, I've got a bunch of little ones. If you got any other big ones you want to toss out.
No, just 2 interesting Kickstarters this week. I used the word interesting. I stretch out that word in the studio behind Myst and Riven. Cyan is doing a new one called Abduction, which seems to be doing pretty well so far, despite the fact that they're asking for like 1.1 million. They're already up to almost 300,000, so they're probably going to hit that. I'm not surprised that people are excited for Cyan to take another crack at a genre that they've been successful in the past, and this one doesn't sound like it has a big online component that's going to tear the company apart like their last big attempt. And then Booger Man. I don't. Why is Booger Man coming back?
Well,
it's not going to come back. It's not. It's definitely not coming back based on its Kickstarter.
What are they asking for on that one?
$375,000, which I guess relative to other Kickstarters is not that crazy, but they're only at 10.
But they just kicked it off, so
that's not.
They have some
They
time.
did, but your first day helps project the interest level. So your big opening, and then a flat middle, and then a big end. I watched their little video, and they had a bunch of footage of old Booger Man, and I laughed at it when I was younger too. But man, that game doesn't look good.
Hey, it's Booger Man. I mean, it's a game called fucking Booger Man. It's like it is. They are who we thought they were. It's like it is exactly what you think it is. And I don't know. The one thing I will say is that Dan Reichert seems really, really excited about that whole thing. But
he would be.
That,
he would be. Maybe you can pull out the that fat stack of Game Informer money and get that made all on his own.
Yeah,
I'd watch
possibly.
Dan Reichert be the main character in the new Booger Man game.
Also on Kickstarter, unfortunately, the Mutant Football League Kickstarter did not come together.
No, it didn't.
They were also asking for like 700 grand or something, and they only made like 140 or something to that effect. So they are regrouping on that one. Best of luck to them on that. A couple of small headlines. Galactic Civilizations 3 has been announced. I have never played a Gal Civ game. Have you, Patrick?
Nope.
Well, maybe this will be my first
Congrats to Galactic Civilization fans.
Yeah, that's everyone I know who loves those games loves those games, so that's probably pretty exciting to them. Pokemon has sold over 4 million copies in its first 2 days.
Yeah,
I don't really have anything to say about that. That's great.
Well, if you combine that with what Nintendo, they didn't get out specifics about the Wii U's sales in September, but they indicated that I think it was up over 200% or something like that, which still probably not a whole lot, but it sounds like, I really doubt they can turn the Wii U around in the same way they turned the 3DS around.
Sure.
But not a surprise that Pokemon is an enormous success for them and is probably going to be one of the reasons that they're able to float through the next couple of years, even as the Wii U continues to try and find its footing. And reading that Wind Waker HD, which has been a huge success for them, only took 6 months to make. Not going to be surprised if we see a whole lot of those announced early next year as a way of getting people continually interested in that platform, and that's probably a smart way to do it. I would replay Metroid Prime if they put out a Metroid Prime HD.
It's also maybe a little bit of a depressing tactic, but perhaps an effective one as well.
You know what? I'm so tired of paying for the same games that don't transfer to a new device over and over again. I'm okay with paying some money if they're actually going to spend some time doing something meaningful to it.
Sure.
So I feel like in some ways,
in this case, 6 months.
Yeah. Also, before we finish out the headlines, if people have any questions, because we're on sort of a tape delay, shoot them to me in the chat, and we will answer a handful before we shut this off.
Last couple I've got. Blizzard Dota, which was also called something else at one point, is now Heroes of the Storm.
Sure.
It's also still a MOBA, which means I probably won't play it.
Nope.
Also, and this is the weirdest one of the day, the PlayStation 4 will be launching in Brazil. It will also be launching for the equivalent of $1,800. Brazil is considered one of the up-and-coming markets for console games in the world right now. Console hardware is doing much, much better over there, and people are playing video games like crazy over there. $1,800, though. Good Lord, that's a lot of money, especially for God only knows what that launch lineup's going to look like. So, sorry, Brazil.
$1,800. If you are someone from Brazil and you are going to pay that, please get in touch with me.
Yeah.
Can I find the one person that is going to pay? Like, that just sounds like you'd get a city together and everyone would pitch in a couple bucks and get the city of PS4.
Yeah.
Jesus, that is.
Yeah, $1,800 is that's a goddamn lot of money for a game console. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how they actually do down there.
Yeah. Some people asking about this this tweet that came out from Game in the UK. Game is a UK retailer. There was a PlayStation meeting, which is where retailers get together and kind of get briefed on what's coming down the pike.
Like a destination PlayStation kind of thing?
Yeah. And they put out a tweet that essentially said, like, all your content will carry over from the PS3 to the PS4. And then someone asked, like, are you serious? And then they were like, yeah, man, that's what we were told. There is no way that is true. Like,
no.
I would be highly skeptical of any of that. My guess is what they must have meant is that, your music and movie and game purchases will all carry over because it's tied to your account. And then when you have situations like Flower and Escape Plan and Sound Shapes and Flow that are getting upgraded to the PS4, that will carry over. Like, you've just bought a Sony version of that product, and whatever version platform it shows up on, you'll get access to that as well. The idea that they would just sort of sneakily announce backwards compatibility at retailer conference is, like, that would be great. You know what? I would happily be wrong. I would love to hear that I am 100% wrong on this, but that would be, I think, completely crazy given that they've signaled that Gaikai is going to try and address the backwards compatibility thing sometime later next year. I That's weird.
This seems like someone in a meeting told a bunch of people supported PS3 content will be brought over to the PS4, no issue. And someone just took that to mean PS3 content will be brought over to the PS4, no issue. You know, and I think it's exactly like you said. It's they told them that the games that they plan to bring over and the content they plan to bring over will all work seamlessly. I think someone just kind of took that quote and ran with it a little too far. We'll see what Sony says, because again, like you, I would love to be totally incorrect about that, and I would love it if every single digital game I bought on PS3 would work on PS4. But I know that won't be the case, because I bought plenty of actual major PS3 games that they just straight up said will not work with the PS4 architecture. So that does not seem like it would be the case.
That is, I'm with you.
Right.
Caltech asks, do you guys think that all of these games releasing early access / Kickstarter hurts or benefits the industry as a whole? Seems a little over excessive now. That's really tough to say, because we're not developers, and does the early access stuff maybe sort of harsh some of the buzz as a game moves toward release? Maybe. I think you look at the kinds of games that are going early access. A lot of them make sense to have sort of a more open, iterative design process, and because Valve has been an infrastructure that allows studios that couldn't build that sort of infrastructure on their own to engage with that. I think more studios are giving it a shot. I mean, it was cool to jump in and check out how Prison Architect was, but I don't have much interest in checking that game out again until it's out. But I'm still super interested in it, and I'm probably more interested in it because I had a chance to check it out early. So, I think it's a little bit stranger when you're talking about a game like Broken Age, that's going to launch early on Steam and have an early access. Adventure games are a little bit different in that capacity, but
story-driven stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same reason why I don't really engage with a whole lot of early access horror stuff, because I want to see that stuff tweaked at the end. But some people like to be involved in that process and see how the sausage is made, and be along there with the developers providing feedback. And I think it's just if I don't think it harms anybody if you want to get involved, and obviously it provides an early financial outlet to studios that have something that people are interested in checking out. So it seems sort of a win across the board, and the stuff that doesn't float to the top, it doesn't really hurt anyone.
Yeah, I guess I just don't really see what the harm would be, because in the case of something that you don't like the idea of playing a game that's not finished, then just don't buy it. Just don't jump on it until it's done. It's like I haven't really gotten into much early access stuff at all. Audio Surf 2 is the only game that I immediately got as soon as it was available via early access, and have continued to play while it has remained under that status. Because that's a game that lends itself to that. You don't have to worry about coming back and replaying story content in that game, because you're just playing levels based on your music. It's the kind of thing that fits perfectly for that. That said, I don't begrudge any other studio for going and trying the early access thing. If it works for you, then go for it. It's not gonna. I don't see how it negatively impacts anything, because all it does is give access to those who want it, and you're still going to eventually get a finished game you can download and play eventually. So why not just you can just wait it out. You don't have to worry about whether it's early access or not. So I don't know. I don't see the downside, I guess. Even if I'm not interested in it, I don't see where there would be any harm from it.
Yeah. I will pass on this public service announcement from several people in the chat that SteamWorld Dig, which I've not played but heard really good things about from all the other guys, is currently on sale in the 3DS eShop for a couple bucks off. So I might pick that up myself. I know that Brad and Vinny and Drew were super into it. And not like I don't have enough to play, but if it's on sale, I might try to pick that up.
Yeah. I have a question here.
Okay.
From Video Game King.
Ooh, the king of video games.
The king of video games
with your presence.
We know Patrick's opinion on the Tevis Thompson article, which was the article that came out recently, in which Tevis Thompson wrote a very long missive on the subject of video game reviews. How do you weigh in on this? Patrick, why don't you start by just reiterating what your opinion is on that article, and maybe set it up just slightly.
Yeah. So the article is basically sort of a long, scathing critique of modern video game reviews, in the sense of how, whether they are product reviews and how that relates to criticism, sort of the abstract idea of criticism, using BioShock Infinite as a focal point, which is to say that Tevis thought that Bioshock Infinite was, he qualifies it as the worst game of the generation. If you read his essay, he explains what he means by that. He's not talking about that in relation to like big rigs or something about
Right.
that, but that a lot of the problems of what happens in video game reviews is that games get a lot of points for trying or having ambition, and
Hmm.
so part of the reason we get stuck in like a 7 to 10 scale is because, well, if a game's really ambitious, it gets a lot of points because clearly it's not big rigs, and so a lot of games end up falling in 7 to 10 as a result of that.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of other points he makes. It's worth reading the whole thing. There's a lot into it. But, other ideas about like how a lot of people don't let their personal politics play into their writing, even though that would result in more honest reviews. So it's hard to break down exactly what. But he's basically saying he doesn't see enough range of opinion in
Hmm.
the reviews of especially the bigger budget AAA games, even though you see sort of a degradation of upon reflection of games as they come out. GTA 4 is a big example. Bioshock Infinite is a big example. And why isn't any of that criticism reflected in the early reviews? And my feeling on it was that I didn't agree with everything he said. I took issue with the tone and some of the language he used. But I thought there were some good underlying points that were takeaways for me that certainly reflect a lot of how I think game reviews should go going forward, and that although I disagree with some of the tone, you should, reading that, it's hard not to think he has some really solid points about what happens with modern video game reviews, and that you don't have to agree with everything or have a takeaway from all of it to think that there isn't something that he has a point about that you might be able to sort of take into a review that I do down the line.
I think I'm basically in the same place you are. I think I take a little bit more umbrage with his with some of the points he makes in that article, because there's a dissonance between his notion that there should be a greater divergence of opinions and this feeling that he has that I've played several games that I would have given BioShock like a 2, and I would have given this like basically he uses his own personal review scores as the specific benchmark he's giving for what for where the divergence between the rest of the mainstream criticism industry and him is. And you can't really do that because you're talking about wanting a diverse array of opinions, and you can't just objectively just say that BioShock is the worst game ever for everyone of this generation, for everyone. He's saying he hates it, and he makes
Right.
completely salient understandable criticisms about that game that, even if I disagree with some of them, totally make sense in the context of his criticisms. But he leaves no room for people to say that they still liked BioShock no matter what. Like to say that those positive reviews should exist somewhere. He basically just kind of says, well, this game was shitty and no one came at it the way they should have, and this is why I hate this. And the core point of wanting a greater, more diverse array of review scores, of actually, wanting a greater scope of criticism, of wanting people to look at games more honestly from their own perspective, like insert your personal politics, insert your personal feelings, insert, what you actually experienced, be honest about it, is totally admirable and correct. It's just the article itself is a very ranty, rambling thing that just comes off as someone more like the writings of someone scorned than someone who has like a legitimate, sort of thoughtful beef with what's going on. And I think that I was like a couple of times I had to sort of force myself to keep reading because the tone of it was kind of killing me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree that, yeah, for a long time in game criticism, and for a very long time this was the case, is that there really was a lot of groupthink. There was a lot of very similar, Jeff giving a Zelda game an 8.8 was considered an insane outlier. Like that kind of thing was definitely like, there were way too many people willing to just kind of go along with this game is really big, so let's just, it has to get a certain kind of score. I don't think anyone I've ever worked with necessarily subscribed to that theory, but there's definitely been that perspective over the years. I think in the last few years that has changed a lot. I think that as more voices have come along, as more people have tried to delve into non-traditional or like more traditional criticism in like in other ways, like stuff that's non-scored, stuff that's more essay-like, stuff that's more focused on trying to get the nitty-gritty of these kinds of games versus just kind of a product review. I think that's changing people's voices and people's perspectives a lot. And I think that, while I agree that there is still a lot of, it does seem like a lot of the bigger games still kind of disproportionately high scores. I think that's changing, and change is a slow process. And, as different voices and different perspectives come in, that will change more and more over time. So I guess I agree with the basic crux of his point. I just didn't really like the way he delivered it at all. It came off like a much headier version of that game journalists are incompetent fuckwits guy, which was not one of my favorite dudes that ever existed either. So, right. Yeah, sorry. That was just kind of where I came off on it.
Yeah, no. And I actually would agree with a lot what you said. What I looked at, one of the big takeaways I had in his essay that isn't necessarily something I can do a whole lot about, but he makes the point that like a lot of the reasons that he posits, it's not you can't get in everyone's head, but a lot of reasons he posits that like a lot of the criticisms of Bioshock Infinite's portrayal of race wasn't picked up on more in a lot of game reviews is due to sort of the homogenous socioeconomic backgrounds of a lot of game reviewers, and I would agree with him there. I would say that the vast majority of game reviewers are white middle class male dudes, and it makes sense that due to certain life and personal experiences may not pick up on or be as sensitive to certain portrayals and stereotypes that are featured in that game. And I think he is right that there needs to be more diversity of opinion, both from social and economic backgrounds, that would allow for that kind of criticism to emerge more on the front lines than in the back end, which is kind of where it happens now. And that just that involves game websites in the future being more mindful of the kinds of people they hire and wanting to have wider perspectives. Like you said, that's a slow process. That is something that happens over time. But I don't think you would talk to any outlet these days that isn't thinking about that when they have the opportunity to hire new people. And now it's just a matter of actually having that implemented. And Tevis, his tone is accusatory, and he comes across as angry, and I don't blame people for being dismissive, but I also think part of the reason he's being loud is to make a point, and he's backing people into a corner to justify their positions, and I think that on some level is an effective tactic, even if it ends up alienating some people in the process.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, as much as I didn't care for the tone, like he didn't push me off his point just by being, aggressive about it. Like, I think that as much as there are things in there I steadfastly disagree with, and there are certain points that I think he actually absolutely contradicts himself with, I think the core idea that he is pushing out is good, and, even if I didn't love the article as it was presented, I respect that he is trying to push for something better, and there's nothing wrong with that, and, I think if nothing else, like, there's I'm trying to. I guess I'm damning with faint praise, but like there's something there in his point that is totally that is totally a great thing to strive for. I just kind of wish he'd been a little bit more careful with some of the some of the accusatory stuff that's in there.
Sure. Well, I think that is a good note for us to end up on, and this hotel Wi-Fi I feel like is going to buckle at any moment. I feel like the fact that I've made it a full hour is about as far as I can stretch this hotel Wi-Fi.
Definitely been stretching the boundaries.
What are you up to this weekend? Well, you're out of town, so you're not going to play any games.
No, I'm going to bring Pokemon with me, but I'm probably not going to play a whole lot of it this weekend. I'm going out of town with the girlfriend. We're going to go drive out to Massachusetts, go stay in a murder house, go hang around Salem for a little bit, pre-Halloween, and just kind of do some stuff. So, and then you got your TEDx talk tomorrow night. How and when can people watch this?
So supposedly they're going to be streaming it. That is what I am told. But I don't have the details on what that means. But I should have the live stream link sometime tomorrow, and so I'll put it up in one of the slots on the site if people want to check it out. But yeah, I'm supposed to talk sometime toward the end of the day. At some point, I was going to be the person that closes the show. I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah, sometime tomorrow in the afternoon, and check the front of the site if you want to watch. Otherwise, it should be archived somewhere on YouTube. But yeah, I'll just be glad to have it over with, so it can no longer be hanging over my head. At this point, I don't care if it's good or not. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And well, I wish you the best of luck, sir, and I hope it leads to many more TED Talks for you down the road. I think this could be a new little cottage industry for you, Patrick
Sure.
Klepek, TED Talker.
Exactly. All right. Well, Alex, I will see you on Monday morning. And good luck catching those Pokemans.
Ow!